She stared at the trio before her, the handsome man in worn jeans and his adorable twin daughters, and made a decision that would change all their lives forever. What happened next shocked everyone, especially the CEO who thought he was the one setting the trap. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected twists and genuine connection, please hit the like button and subscribe to see more heartwarming stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Rain pelted the windows of Jonathan Pierce's penthouse as he stared at the Forbes magazine on his coffee table. His own face looked back at him from the cover, next to the headline, "The Billionaire Bachelor: How Jonathan Pierce Built an Empire But Failed to Build a Family." He tossed the magazine aside with a bitter laugh. 39 years old, CEO of Pierce Technologies, worth just north of $2.8 billion, and completely alone except for his 6-year-old twin daughters, Lily and Emma. Their mother had left when they were barely a year old, unable to handle the demands of motherhood alongside the pressure of being married to someone like him. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of his home office, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Emma says her tummy hurts again." Jonathan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Emma's tummy aches had become more frequent lately. The family therapist said it was likely psychosomatic. The girls needed more stability, more maternal presence. He had tried dating, but the women he met through business circles were either intimidated by his daughters or clearly more interested in his bank account than building a real family. "Coming, sweetheart," he said, following Lily to the bedroom the twins shared. Emma lay curled on her pink bedspread, arms wrapped around her middle. "It hurts, Daddy." As he comforted his daughter, an idea began to take shape in his mind. What if the women he met didn't know who he was? What if they saw him as just an ordinary single father, not a billionaire CEO? Would their reactions be different? Would they see his daughters, and him, for who they really were? 3 days later, Jonathan sat across from his chief of staff, Maria Alvarez, outlining his plan. "You want to do what?" Maria's eyebrows nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Go undercover. Pretend to be a regular guy. See how women react to me and the girls when they don't know about the money." Maria shook her head. "This is insane, John. And potentially unethical. I'm not trying to trick anyone long-term. Just, get past that first impression. If I meet someone I connect with, I'll tell her the truth right away." "And where exactly are you planning to find these unsuspecting women?" Jonathan smiled. "I've signed up for Single Parents Connect. It's a blind dating service for single parents. My profile says I'm Jonathan Peterson, middle school science teacher and father of twins." Maria rolled her eyes. "Because you know so much about teaching science. I have 2 science degrees from MIT. I think I can fake it for one date." "And what about the twins? They're going on these dates too?" "Not initially. But the service sets up family meetups after the first date goes well. I need to find someone who'll love them, Maria. Not just tolerate them to get to me." Maria's expression softened. "The girls need a mother figure, I get it. But there have to be more straightforward ways. I've tried those ways. They don't work for someone in my position." The following Saturday, Jonathan found himself sitting in a modest coffee shop wearing jeans, a simple button-down shirt, and the watch he'd had since college instead of his usual Patek Philippe. He'd driven his old Honda Accord that he kept for sentimental reasons instead of the Bentley or Tesla. His blind date was 5 minutes late, and he was beginning to think she might not show when the bell above the door jingled. A woman entered, scanning the cafe with searching eyes. Even from a distance, Jonathan could see she was beautiful, but not in the polished, camera-ready way he was used to. Her curly chestnut hair was slightly frizzy from the humidity, and she wore a simple yellow sundress that brightened her olive complexion. Their eyes met, and she smiled uncertainly, making her way to his table. "Jonathan?" she asked. He stood. "That's me. You must be Eliza." "Sorry I'm late," she said, settling into the chair across from him. One of my students had a crisis with her art project, and I couldn't just leave her in tears. You're an art teacher? At Westbrook Elementary. 4th and 5th grade. Her smile was warm, her eyes kind. Throughout their coffee, Jonathan found himself forgetting his ruse, genuinely enjoying her company. She spoke passionately about her students, asked thoughtful questions about his daughters, and laughed easily at his jokes. So, middle school science, she said, stirring her latte. What made you choose teaching? Jonathan had prepared for this. I love seeing that moment when a concept clicks for a kid. When they suddenly understand something about how the world works that they didn't before. It wasn't a lie, it was exactly why he'd started his tech company, to create educational software that made science accessible to everyone. That's beautiful, she said. I feel the same way about art. It's not just about technique, it's about helping them see the world differently. They talked for nearly 2 hours, and when they finally parted ways, Jonathan felt lighter than he had in years. They made plans to meet again the following weekend, this time with their children. Eliza had an 8-year-old son named Noah. On the drive home, doubt crept in. What was he doing? He was starting something based on a lie. But it wasn't entirely a lie, he hadn't presented a false personality, just a different profession and financial situation. Still, he resolved to tell her the truth after their second date, assuming it went as well as the first. The family meetup was set for Saturday at a local park. Jonathan dressed the twins in their simplest clothes, vetoing Emma's request to bring her iPad and reminding both girls about their pretend game. Remember, we're pretending Daddy is a teacher, not a company boss, he explained as they drove to the park. But why do we have to pretend? Lily asked, her small brow furrowed. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that he wanted someone to love them for who they were, not what they had? Sometimes people act differently when they know Daddy has a special job. I want to make sure Eliza likes us just for us. Emma, always the more perceptive twin, narrowed her eyes. That's lying, Daddy. You said lying is bad. Jonathan winced. You're right, honey. This is a special case, and I promise I'll tell Eliza the truth very soon. When they arrived at the park, Eliza and a lanky boy with a mop of dark curls were already waiting by the playground. Noah appeared shy at first, but when Emma boldly asked if he liked dinosaurs, his face lit up, and soon all 3 children were engrossed in an elaborate game involving a dinosaur kingdom. Eliza and Jonathan sat on a nearby bench, watching them play. Your daughters are wonderful, she said. So different, but both so bright. They've had a rough few years, Jonathan admitted. Their mother left when they were babies. Eliza's expression was compassionate without being pitying. That must have been incredibly hard. For all of you. What about Noah's father? Jonathan asked, realizing he didn't know her backstory. He died when Noah was 3. Cancer, she said quietly. It was quick, which was merciful for him but left us reeling. Jonathan's heart ached for her. I'm so sorry. She shook her head, smiling sadly. It's been 5 years. We've built a good life, Noah and I. But sometimes I worry he's forgetting his dad. Their conversation deepened, touching on grief, single parenting, and hopes for their children's futures. When Emma scraped her knee on the slide, Eliza was there with a first aid kit from her purse, bandaging the wound with gentle efficiency while telling a silly story that had Emma giggling through her tears. Watching Eliza with his daughter, Jonathan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just attraction, it was recognition of someone who could be part of their family. And that's when he knew he couldn't continue the charade. Eliza, he began as they walked back to their cars, the children a few steps ahead. There's something I need to tell you. She looked at him curiously. I haven't been entirely honest about what I do for a living, he confessed. Before he could continue, Emma turned around. Daddy's not really a teacher, she announced proudly. He's a CEO. That means he's the boss of everybody. And we live in a big house with a swimming pool inside. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. So much for easing into the truth. When he looked at Eliza, her expression was unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I should have told you sooner. I've had bad experiences with people being interested in me for the wrong reasons. I wanted to make sure you liked me, and the girls, for who we are, not what I have." Eliza was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "I understand why you did it. But starting anything meaningful with a lie." She shook her head. "I need some time to think." His heart sank as she called Noah and headed to her car, a modest 10-year-old Subaru, he noticed with a pang. For 3 days, Jonathan heard nothing from Eliza. He threw himself into work, staying late at the office to avoid the disappointed looks on his daughters' faces. They had liked Eliza and Noah immensely. On the 4th day, his assistant interrupted a budget meeting. "Sir, there's a Ms. Eliza Morales here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Jonathan's heart raced as he excused himself and went to the reception area. Eliza stood there in paint-splattered jeans and a worn university sweatshirt, looking completely out of place among the sleek chrome and glass of Pierce Technologies headquarters. "Can we talk?" she asked. He led her to his private office, acutely aware of the contrast between her casual attire and the obvious luxury surrounding them. Once the door closed, she spoke first. "I did some research after you left. Jonathan Pierce, tech prodigy turned education software pioneer. Donates millions to underfunded schools. Recently launched a foundation to bring STEM education to rural communities." She paused. "That last part wasn't in any articles. It was from one of my colleagues who got a grant from your foundation last year." Jonathan wasn't sure what to say. "Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" she asked. "Because the moment I do, everything changes," he said quietly. "People either want something from me or they're intimidated. The real me gets lost behind the bank account. And you think I'm that shallow? I didn't know you well enough to be sure. I've been burned before, Eliza. Badly. And it's not just me I have to protect now." She nodded slowly. "I get that. But here's something you should know about me." She took a deep breath. "After my husband died, I was approached by a children's book publisher. They wanted to turn our story, his illness, how I explained death to Noah through art, into a picture book. It was successful. Very successful." Jonathan blinked. "You're E.J. Morales? The author of When Stars Come Home?" She nodded. "The book, the sequels, the animated adaptation. I'm not in your league, but I'm not exactly struggling to make rent. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the moment I do, everything changes," she echoed his words with a small smile. "Men either see dollar signs or feel threatened by my success. The real me gets lost behind the royalty checks." Despite himself, Jonathan laughed. "So we were both hiding. Playing the same game for the same reasons," she agreed. "But here's the difference, I was going to tell you on our next date. Because I was already falling for you, Jonathan. The real you, the man who lights up when he talks about his daughters, who listens like what I'm saying really matters, who still grieves for a relationship his children will never have with their mother." Hope bloomed in his chest. "Does this mean you're giving me another chance?" "I'm considering it," she said, but her smile told him more than her words. "But I have conditions. No more lies, even by omission. And we take it slow, our children have to be our priority." I couldn't agree more. "Good. Now, I believe you owe me and Noah a real tour of that house with the indoor swimming pool Emma was so excited about." 6 months later, Jonathan sat on the edge of the very same indoor pool, watching as Eliza taught Emma to float on her back while Noah and Lily engaged in a spirited splash war nearby. "Look, Daddy. I'm doing it," Emma called, her little body stiff with concentration as she floated with Eliza's hands barely supporting her. "I see you, sweetheart. You're amazing," he called back. Eliza caught his eye and smiled, that same warm smile that had captured his heart on their first coffee date. Their relationship had progressed slowly, carefully, with both of them conscious of the children's feelings. They'd had their challenges, merging two different parenting styles, navigating their public personas, finding time for just the two of them amid demanding careers and 3 active children. But tonight, watching Eliza with his daughters, how patient she was with Emma's fears, how she encouraged Lily's independence without letting her take foolish risks, Jonathan knew with absolute certainty that he had found what he'd been searching for. Later, after the children were asleep, he and Eliza sat on the terrace overlooking the city lights. "I have a confession to make," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "What's that?" "I knew who you were on our first date." Jonathan pulled back to look at her. "What? How?" She laughed softly. "Your watch gave you away. That beaten-up old thing on the wrist of a supposed middle school teacher? It's a limited edition MIT Engineering Excellence Award watch. Only 50 were ever made. My late husband was obsessed with watches, he would have recognized it instantly. I looked it up after I noticed it, and your name came up in the list of recipients." Jonathan was stunned. "So you knew I was lying from the beginning?" "I suspected you weren't being entirely truthful. But I could see you were genuine in other ways, how you talked about your daughters, how you listened to me. I decided to see where it would go." "Why didn't you say anything?" She took his hand. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be known for who they are, not what they have or what they've achieved. You needed that chance, Jonathan. So I gave it to you." Overwhelmed, he pulled her close. "How did I get so lucky?" "It wasn't luck," she murmured against his chest. "It was authenticity. When you dropped the pretense and showed me the real you, vulnerable, flawed, trying your best for your children, that's when I fell in love." Jonathan realized then that in trying to protect himself from those who might love him for his money, he'd almost missed finding someone who loved him despite it. The real wealth in his life wasn't in his bank accounts or company holdings, it was right here, in this woman who saw through his defenses, and in the 3 children sleeping soundly under his roof. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both momentous and entirely natural. "I love you too," she replied. "All of you, the billionaire CEO and the dad who still can't properly braid his daughter's hair." "Hey, I've gotten better at that." Marginally, she teased. As they laughed together under the stars, Jonathan knew that the headline in Forbes had been wrong. He hadn't failed to build a family. He'd simply been building it one piece at a time, waiting for the most important piece to find him when both of them were ready. 1 year later, the Pierce Morales family gathered on the beach for a sunset ceremony. Noah stood proudly as his mother's best man, while Lily and Emma scattered rose petals along the sand as flower girls. Jonathan watched as Eliza walked toward him, radiant in a simple white dress that danced around her legs in the ocean breeze. He thought of their journey, from 2 people hiding behind pretenses to 2 people who had found strength in their shared vulnerability. They had merged their lives gradually, thoughtfully, always putting the children first. Noah had bloomed under Jonathan's mentorship, discovering a passion for robotics that complemented his artistic talents. The twins had found in Eliza the maternal presence they'd been missing, someone who nurtured their dreams while teaching them empathy and resilience. As Eliza reached him and took his hands, Jonathan realized that his deception, born of fear,